When discussing the history behind Cyberpunk 2077 and characters such as Johnny Silverhand, Morgan Blackhand, and Saburo Arasaka, you will often hear about the corporate wars. In Mike Pondsmith's vision of Cyberpunk, most aspects of corporate competition primarily remained on the economic level, but there were also instances of actual warfare taking place. The vast majority of the conflicts between the megacorporations were not declared wars per se, but still contained all the aspects of a real thing in terms of weapons, cyber-enhanced soldiers, and casualties. In the 1980s, British Petroleum may have been the first to see the advantage in establishing a military arm of its corporate power, in this case by subcontracting the protection of its South American oil holdings to the local right-wing paramilitaries, but it wouldn't be the last. As more and more megacorporations grew to immense sizes and expanded their influence, many of them soon became equal to small nations in their own right, establishing their own military forces and the will to use them. By its very nature, most corporate wars must be covert, as very few nations are willing to allow two companies to simply duke it out on their territory. Early on, most corporations hired actual terrorist groups to strike at enemy targets. As these groups became more undependable, the companies created battle forces disguised to resemble terrorists. Many terrorist groups, such as the infamous Red Flag Army and the New Aryan Sons, are actually fully equipped corporate strike forces, whose seemingly random attacks on rival offices and strongholds are part of larger covert warfare actions. Prior to the first corporate war in 2004, the general consensus was that corporations never fought each other longer than necessary, mainly to avoid too much attention from governments. However, as the size and power of the megacorporations grew, many smaller nations began capitulating to the power of the corporations. The first corporate war occurred between 2004 and February 2006. It took place when electronics giant Eurobusiness Machines, aka EBM, and rival spaceplane manufacturer Orbital Air came to blows over floundering Transworld Air. Most of the conflict took place via stock manipulation and boardroom maneuvers, with only occasional military strikes against each other's holdings. The three megacorporations involved in the first corporate war were EBM, Orbital Air, and Zetatech. EBM were already the largest computer and high-tech manufacturer in the world, and one of the most significant corporations in existence under the guidance of Dr. Kurt Muller. Muller and his two partners in the triumvirate, Ulf Grunwald of Munich and Sir Nathaniel Poole of London, comprised the majority vote of EBM. Orbital Air, with their large fleet of French-made Hermes spaceplanes, monopolized all orbital lifting capability. Many corporations rely on Orbital Air for transport of cargo out of the gravity well. The Eurospace Agency's Crystal Tower colony, a massive orbital hotel complex for the ultra-rich, would be out of business without them. With all commercial spacebound cargo dependent upon them, Orbital Air is in a lucrative position that it would like very much to maintain. A large part of Orbital Air's budget and covert resources is put to use ensuring that they remain the leader in orbital technology, and that the competition does not make it off the ground, literally or figuratively. Zetatech was an up-and-coming high-tech company doing its best to grow and diversify. It carved itself a small niche in the industry through the traditional methods: quality products, industrial espionage, and strategically applied violence. The first corporate war began simple enough. EBM's leveraged buyout of the failing Transworld Airlines fell apart after negotiations turned sour. Orbital Air, who desperately wanted to obtain Transworld Airlines' air traffic facilities in the US, came to their aid by blocking EBM's buyout attempt. In retaliation, EBM dispatched terrorists to kidnap the Orbital Air negotiations team en route to close the Transworld Airlines deal. Unfortunately, the terrorists bundled and EBM's anonymity was compromised. Orbital Air immediately responded by recruiting Zetatech as an ally, who unleashed a torrent of net attacks against EBM. These attacks, though damaging, were quickly put down, forcing Zetatech out of the war. EBM responded with a wave of attacks against Transworld Airlines and Orbital Air facilities. Orbital Air met this challenge well, beefing up security and using their dominance in the low Earth orbit to establish a blockade against EBM facilities. Orbital Air finally struck back with a wave of terrorism and piracy of their own. EBM answered this threat with an army of corporate solos and proxy third world troops. There were only two major battles during the conflict. The first occurred when Orbital Air Commandos captured a central EBM space station in response to a similarly large hijacking on that same day by EBM. Both sides were chastised by the European Space Agency, who lifted all the blockades and warned the competitors not to extend their fight into low Earth orbit again. The second battle didn't occur until a year later, when Orbital Air Commandos attacked CEO Ulf Grunwalder's compound in Bavaria, capturing him and forcing EBM to surrender. The ramifications of this war were vast. It was the first conflict of its kind. More importantly, it gave other companies the green light to use wholesale military tactics to obtain favorable business results. Although some smaller firms had engaged in petty armed squabbles in the past, nothing had ever matched the ferocity and size of this conflict, and it seemed only a matter of time before another one would come. The second corporate war, which occurred between April 2008 and August 2010, pitted biofuel manufacturer Petrochem against its massive Russian rival, Soviet World Oil Industries, aka Sovoil. It was regarded by many as the most globally devastating conflict of the four wars. Petrochem is the world's largest Q2 producer, the superfuel of the future. As mentioned in the Cyberpunk 2077 gameplay demo, Petrochem control millions of acres of arable land across the United States. This land is used to grow the genetically altered wheat that is used to make Q2. Petrochem is also one of the largest remaining oil producers. With the oil supply dwindling, all remaining fossil fuels are used to make plastics and other synthetics. All of these assets are huge and accordingly hard to protect from other companies that would like to usurp Petrochem's wealth. As a result, Petrochem invests huge amounts of money in protecting itself, maintaining an armed force worthy of a small country. As the name suggests, oil is Sovoil's main product and its primary source of income. The company pumps 10 million barrels a day from fields in the Caspian and South China Seas, Antarctica, Siberia and Kazakhstan. Petrochem, the only other company active in crude oil recovery, pumps a third of that amount. Sovoil sells its crude oil around the world, although over half finds its way into the domestic Soviet common market. The Soviet Union is one of the few regions of the world where gasoline-powered automobiles are still common, although Q2-driven vehicles are increasing in popularity. The one area in which Sovoil cannot sell oil is the United States. Petrochem has a monopoly on the United States oil and Q2 markets. Sovoil retaliates by preventing the sale of Petrochem oil products in the USSR. Fighting over drilling rights in the South China Sea, this corporate war was far deadlier since with the collapse of the Soviet Union a decade earlier, Sovoil had gained military technology previously only accessible to major nations. The second corporate war began as a misunderstanding between the oil giants Petrochem and Sovoil. Relations began to sour between the two firms when a merger deal fell through at the 11th hour. A huge drilling accident at a Petrochem platform then brought the two companies to blows in the Pacific Rim. Initially, Sovoil enjoyed a string of military victories, although both sides had severely crippled each other's oil facilities within just a few weeks. Petrochem fought back hard, expending untold millions to regain the upper hand, at the cost of thousands of lives. Petrochem's success peaked with their surprise capture of the Spratly Island chain and their assassination of Sovoil founder and CEO Anatoly Novikovo. But it was still not enough. Sovoil easily repelled Petrochem's follow-up offensive of October 2009, reducing Petrochem's military strength considerably. There was no formal surrender, but the war effectively ended with Sovoil victorious. The second corporate war had several ramifications. First, many analysts, governments, and the general public were shocked that a conflict between two corporations could elevate beyond the violence seen in the First War, with some commentators even making comparisons with World War II. From the destruction of a Petrochem oil platform to the bitter end in the Spratly archipelago, this conflict firmly established the idea of open corporate warfare. Secondly, this war marked the first time that that a multinational firm publicly defied national government. Soval completely ignored the world of nations and did whatever it wished. Both sides used the smaller Pacific Rim nations as extensions of their own armed forces, actually replacing administrations in some cases and installing friendly ones. In fact, Petrochem's assassination of Novikova was carried out with a squadron of modified Mirage free fighters on loan from Malaysia. Because of constant raiding by both sides against each other's oil refineries, drilling facilities and pipelines, the war left most of the southern Pacific Rim badly polluted. The South China Sea, the focus of the conflict, became uninhabitable. Entire national economies were ruined, and although Soval was forced to pay reparations, no amount of money could ever undo the damage. The third corporate war, which took place between February 2016 and November 2016, was another milestone in corporate warfare because it was fought almost entirely in the net. Hostilities began when financial examiners from the Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce uncovered a confidence scheme being perpetrated by certain investment counselors at Merrill, Asugeka and Finch against private investors using the Rothstein Fund, a subsidiary of the Bank of New York, as leverage. They notified the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office, who began an investigation the next day. The Rothstein Fund, angered by Merrill, Asugeka and Finch's duplicity and not wishing to get dragged down in the investigation, turned everything they had over to the district attorney's office. They also hired Netrunners to begin probing Merrill, Asugeka and Finch. In response, Merrill, Asugeka and Finch immediately countered and unleashed their Netrunners to launch an assault on the Rothstein Fund, first hitting Rothstein's financial targets. Then the Merrill, Asugeka and Finch strike teams turned their attention to actually destroying Rothstein computer systems, which escalated the fighting. For several days, the situation was a confused melee. Data fortresses became armed camps as everyone nervously watched to see what would happen next. Netwatch responded by limiting net access and cracking down on computer crime, making several sweeps resulting in numerous arrests and flatlines. Both the Rothstein Fund and Merrill, Asugeka and Finch escalated the conflict to the meat world. They began hiring mercenaries. During a 12-hour period, short-pitched battles were fought in low Earth orbit and on Earth, all to destroy the physical locations of the enemy's net communications gear. These battles ended with considerable loss of life and millions of dollars in material destruction. The next 6 months consisted of endless net raids, most of them inconsequential and undecisive. Indeed, more damage was done during the 12 hours of actual firefights than during the entire remainder of the conflict. When it was over, the Rothstein Fund ceased to exist as a single entity. Merrill, Asugeka and Finch turned the corpses of two of their executives, who had started the whole mess, over to the Los Angeles District Attorney. They also got struck with the bill for damages done in lower Earth orbit and on Earth. This time, the corporate conflict shocked no one, although a number of analysts were surprised the war lasted as long as it did. The way the war was fought, being based mostly in the net, was rather unusual, and it sparked a couple dozen theories by various pundits that perhaps this was the new way corporate wars would be fought. Others maintained that, much like the infantry in military doctrine, solos will never go out of style. While the Third Corporate War was primarily fought by computer attacks in the net, most megacorporations soon chose to protect operations with their own paramilitary forces, or to subcontract security to specialized corporations. One such corporation was Arasaka Security, a multinational founded by Saburo Arasaka with the goal of restoring Japan to its pre-World War II glory. With legions of black-clad bodyguards, security troops and covert ops teams, Arasaka soon was the most potent paramilitary group in the world. Its counterpart was US-based Militech, specializing in military hardware and mercenaries for hire. There was no love lost between these two corporations. All they lacked was an excuse, and by 2021, they had it. The Fourth Corporate War started as a hostile takeover squabble between Aquatech Company, OTEC, and submarine transport firm Sino to acquire the assets of bankrupt shipping firm IHAG. Both corporations brought in their security contractors. Militech and Arasaka respectively. At first, conflict was limited to attacks on sea-based facilities, but soon Arasaka and Militech, sensing a chance to get rid of a long-hated rival, raised the stakes. Attacks on sea farms and sub-bases gave way to attacks and sabotage of onshore facilities. By the summer of 2022, it was open warfare in the streets with tanks, troops, aircraft, and orbital artillery all in play. Pitched battles raged around the world until the final blow in late 2022. On one fateful day, as Morgan Blackhand and Adam Smasher went one-on-one on the top of Arasaka Towers in Night City, the nuclear demolition charges Morgan Blackhand deployed set off the self-destruct bomb Arasaka had placed in its data core. This destroyed most of Night City and contaminated the ruins with lethal fallout. The Arasaka nuke cracked the city water table, flooding lower regions to depths of over 50 feet. The nuke's enhanced EMP effect also fried most of the cyberware in Night City, rendering thousands deaf, blind, or functionally limbless. Over 1 million people are killed, another million die in the resulting after effects. To end the fighting, US President Elizabeth Kress nationalized Militech under the command of the US Joint Military Command, and the EU government followed suit on both sides throughout the European Union. Withdrawing back to Japan, Arasaka staged a coup to overthrow the government. With nuclear missiles supplied from ally North Korea, Arasaka held Japan and the rest of the world hostage until the Japanese self-defense fleet finally crushed the Arasaka shogunate and delivered Saburo Arasaka's head to a vengeful United States. The Fourth Corporate War was finally over, at a cost of millions of lives and immense destruction. The survivors swore never to let the megacorporations rebuild their private armies again, but without the threat of a powerful national military to hold them in check, it's only going to be a matter of time till the corporations are back to their old tricks. To put the corporate wars into context, one should be reminded that Cyberpunk 2077 quest designer Patrick Mills has previously stated that while CD Projekt Red are replicating the feeling of playing Cyberpunk 2020 in Cyberpunk 2077, it will not be a strict continuation from 2020 to 57 years later. CD Projekt Red have modified the timeline and reinterpreted events to break themselves out of any dialectical conundrums. So while the corporate wars are certainly significant to the history of Cyberpunk 2077, consider everything subject to change. Hey Chumba, I'm Kazuliski, and I hope you found this Cyberpunk 2077 discussion on the history of the corporate wars to be informative. If you are interested in additional Cyberpunk 2077 content, be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions or feedback, always let me know in the comment section. Thank you for watching.